Welcome into Surviving Paradise, the podcast that takes a sometimes serious, oftentimes humorous look at the claim by Jehovah's Witnesses that they are living in a modern day spiritual paradise. I am your host, Stacy Bauman, former elder, ministerial servant, most importantly, a little guy raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses throughout the 70s and the 80s. As always, welcome in. We try to heal, we try to laugh, we try to be informative. Sometimes we just rant, and that's going to be the case this week. But please note, we're not here trying to offend anyone, simply sharing our own perspective, my own perspective. I'm coming to you again this week from Flood headquarters, where construction continues in my home. Would you be interested in knowing that one of the construction workers repairing my walls, ceilings, and floors after massive water damage is named Noah? Not kidding. Coincidence or Holy Spirit? I'll let you be the judge. It might be a divine sign that maybe I'm being invited to return to the Ark of Jehovah's Witnesses before I experience the real flood of Armageddon. I don't know. You can't make this stuff up, though. Incidentally, it only added to the revelation to learn one of the other guys on the construction crew is named David. Yeah, I asked him how many wives he had. He looked confused. But here we are navigating my ongoing construction project. Thanks for being here. It has been a heck of a couple weeks, and I cannot guarantee we might need to have a break in programming in the next week or two. If there isn't a new episode, just note, we're having fun over here. I will return. Amidst the chaos, I find myself dwelling on all the ongoing changes happening in Jehovah's Witnesses. And despite being removed from the spiritual paradise of their world for 15 years now, I'm still heartsick. I'm confused at times. I'm even angry that so many good people continue to plug along, obeying 9 guys in upstate New York. But that isn't what really upsets me personally. I've seen that my entire life with this organization. What really upsets me is something I've mentioned or alluded to on this show many, many times in the past. It continues to color my thoughts and feelings almost every time I turn on this microphone. It's something among Jehovah's Witnesses that has continued to gnaw at my consciousness, even though I'm free of it all. And after years of thinking, observing, and researching the subject, I think I'm finally arriving at somewhat of a conclusion on this matter that is just eating away at me. I hope you're comfortable entering my thinking zone for the next few minutes, which includes a mix of emotions, psychology, research, and more. I'm bearing a little bit of my own vulnerability or personality this week. Since I was a boy in Jehovah's Witnesses, then an adult, then an elder, I've been long sickened by how easy it is for Jehovah's Witnesses to dismiss people who have been damaged by this religion throughout their history. I'm not talking about just someone today. Obviously, we're very interested in what's happening now. I'm talking about any precious 1 in 400 trillion unique soul that's ever been born and been a Jehovah's Witness. You may be wondering, what does this guy mean? What is he talking about? I get it. If you're willing to take a little walk with me for the next hour or so, please stay. This is more a stream of consciousness week here in paradise. So I'll cut to the chase and do my best to explain this, even though I don't really know if I'm doing a good job. But from a very young age, I couldn't shake what I saw as a Jehovah's Witness. We all just seemed like numbers, like cogs in a machine. And I've confessed here before that I'm a classic overthinker, a daydreamer. And as a boy, even as an adult elder, I would drift off during meetings to what was truly important. The people. It didn't take much to look around the Kingdom Hall during another boring talk or service meeting and look around at all the faces, the personalities, the souls that were sitting next to me. And in those moments, my mind would fill with questions like this. Do we really care? Do we really care about that single parent over there with mental health issues raising those kids alone? How do we show we care? Do we care about that teen over there who looks scared? How much did we care about Sister Jones who just passed away? Why are we right back here answering questions at the Watchtower study when I can look over and see that the seat she sat in for decades is now empty? Do I really care about all those neighbors that won't answer their doors on Saturday and take my magazines? I think you get the idea. I could keep going. There was a lot of soul searching done on my part as a Jehovah's Witness, and frankly, my personal desire to show how much I cared about other people, I'm not going to lie to you, led to exhaustion and burnout as an elder. After years as an elder, I noticed that many other elders just don't contemplate such things. At least they weren't open about it. They didn't share it. Nor did they go out of their way to show that they cared about people. Yeah, they were good at pointing to the publications or enforcing a man-made rule out of New York. And then they would look at themselves and say, yeah, I'm doing a heck of a job as a shepherd. But that just didn't rest with me. Most of my long observations clashed with what the Bible told me to feel and what I could see was going on with my own eyes. From the Watchtower of 1988, October 1st, pages 10 through 14, the series Appreciation for Our Brothers, we're told this, quote, now that you have purified your souls or lives by your obedience to the truth with unhypocritical brotherly affection, Greek word Philadelphia, as the result, love, form of agape, one another intensely from the heart. Love one another intensely from the heart, end quote. What I did see, I should say, in many cases, not all, I'm fully recognize that I paint with a bit of a broad brush, just note that is the majority I speak of, was what is mentioned in that same article just a few paragraphs away. That's what I could see. And I'm guessing others noticed it as well. We're supposed to be loving each other intensely. But the article continues, quote, how do we feel deep down in our hearts towards some of the brothers and sisters in the congregation? Do we greet them at meetings with a forced smile, quickly looking away or passing on? Worse still, do we try to avoid having to greet them at all? End quote. Watchtower 88. Now that is something I did observe on a regular basis, almost every meeting. And look, I'm going to say it. I'm ashamed to admit this, but I'm guilty of this myself. With people that I wasn't particularly close to, didn't want to get involved with, or didn't care for because of the way they treated others. I'm just as guilty. I was kind, but to say I was loving them intensely from the heart, well, that would be dishonest. I think anyone that has been a Jehovah's Witness can relate to this. And frankly, it was this dynamic that was a huge, huge catalyst to me finally throwing in the towel on Jehovah's Witnesses. But now, for what has always really troubled me, and continues to if I'm being open. Full admission here, this may just be my personality or thinking. I just want you to know that, but this is what's been on my mind this week. What really troubles me haunts my thoughts to this day, and here it is. With all these changes we're witnessing, with all the new light, am I the only person that wonders how Jehovah's Witnesses so easily dismiss how all of this organization's changes, past and present, have cost precious 1 in 400 trillion people and personalities their very lives? That by teaching self-proclaimed truths that would eventually be exposed as, we were wrong all along, a lie, or even old light, that those things have played a role in not just wasting lives, but even in getting people killed. I make a lot of jokes on this show about the ungrown beards of the past or the number of razors the sisters had to use to shave their legs to get into a dress for over a century. And those things truly are funny. They are funny. But there is so much more to this organization and what they do to their people that isn't. It's this dynamic, this fact, that has troubled me for decades. The fact that millions can so easily dismiss the errors of Jehovah's Witness leadership that has cost precious souls, people, a good, happy life. That their teachings and commands have destroyed families. That what they tell us to believe and demand that we obey has literally gotten Jehovah's Witnesses of the past killed. So my question is this week, in a not-so-funny episode. How does a Jehovah's Witness just ignore this and carry on like nothing or no one has been deeply, life or death impacted, but the guys in upstate New York just continue on? How does a Jehovah's Witness explain to someone that hasn't seen their child in decades because they've been shunning them for something they did at 16 years old, or maybe for not becoming a Jehovah's Witness at all? How do you look into the eyes of a family member that lost someone that refused blood or blood fractions that were then approved just months later and would have saved their lives? How does a Jehovah's Witness just carry on not looking at all of this? At the human heart level, how do they do it? How do they not look over at the elderly sister sitting alone in the back row of the Kingdom Hall who never married or had children and just give her a smile, knowing she wasted her life and gave up on every dream she ever had for this organization? I could keep going with many examples, but how? How does a person so easily dismiss the people who came before them? How do they just forget, or even worse, force themselves to forget what has happened to precious human lives in the past, maybe distant, maybe decades ago, maybe not so distant, all in the name of Jehovah's Witnesses? I fully recognize that this is a bigger conversation and I'm rambling. We could talk about memory. We could talk about the passage of time. We could talk about human nature. We could talk about growing complacency. I know it's real. It's so real that many people, including PMOs, count on this human dynamic when they fade away, because it is real. People look the other way and they forget. With the passage of time, even their local body of elders tend to forget them, that being someone who faded. Folks, I'm here to say that I've never been able to wrap my mind around this. Jehovah's Witnesses will carry on this week by going to meetings with beards and slacks, minus the necktie, and think everything is just swell. It's highly likely that no one will give 2 seconds thought to the Jehovah's Witnesses of the past century that had it all wrong because Jehovah just didn't think it was time to tell the truth. I truly hope no one tries to tell me this bizarre, unspoken dynamic doesn't exist within the organization. It's a very real inside piece of Jehovah's Witnesses. Look the other way. Forget. I often refer to it on the show as pay no attention to the man behind the curtain from The Wizard of Oz, or just again, look the other way. This dynamic is so pervasive inside this cult that people will shun the extended family of someone who has a family member recently DF'd, as if they did something wrong. Sorry, DF'd. Sorry, removed is the right word now. Simply because they can't or won't deal with the awkward, painful emotions that the innocent family members are experiencing. The other people in the congregation will kind of just avoid them. Why? Because it's easier to forget. I've said I view this silly show at times as a conversation between friends and peers, and I truly do, even though it's one way due to technology and the nature of it. But I welcome the comments, opinions, and thoughts and observations of everyone on this subject, if I'm explaining it, my own feelings correctly. Do you know what I'm talking about? Jehovah's Witnesses have an uncanny ability, and again, I know it's human nature, but they claim to be the most loving organization on earth, here to save the rest of us, and they still have an uncanny ability to ignore everyone negatively impacted that came before them, even those that have died in the name of this religion. And I guess I'm here to say this week, I can't. And I never could forget, and I never could look the other way. I'm not here propping up my own personal character. I'm just sharing with you, anybody willing to listen, my friends. Have you given this any thought as a Jehovah's Witness, or even once after you've left? We tend to not want to think about it after we left. We want to put it far behind us. But it always raises to the surface for me when I watch the people on social media, the Jehovah's Witnesses, dancing in the aisles as they get beards and slacks with nary a thought to the people who were counseled on facial hair in the past, even those that left the organization over something like that. Or even the people, and I know one, who had serious facial skin conditions that needed a beard to cover them, or the pair of women's slacks that they couldn't wear to cover an embarrassing skin condition on their legs. I know of them. And folks, that's the silly small stuff. But how does anyone that professes to represent Jehovah of the Bible so easily forget people? At Hebrews chapter 6 and verse 10 of the New World Translation, we're told, quote, "For God is not unrighteous so as to forget your work and the love you showed for his name by ministering and continuing to minister to the holy ones." End quote. God doesn't forget, or does he? Because his organization seems to. With each passing new light adjustment in 2024, no one seems to want to talk about the people that live their whole lives believing in lies. I can hear some now, so let's soften it a bit, who live their whole lives believing in, old light, as if it didn't impact those lives in a major way and also wasn't true. No one wants to talk about that, or them. Why? When was the last time in a conversation with a fellow Jehovah's Witness that you said, quote, "Wow, another round of new light. I feel so terrible for my fellow brothers and sisters that lived their whole life believing something in error. How do you think it impacted them? How about that kid that wasn't allowed a blood fraction before Jehovah decided it was okay to take one? Ever think about that?" End quote. When's the last time you had a conversation like that? Let me guess. You've never had that conversation. I get it. I was a bit of a weirdo or an overthinker. Or more accurately, I was an apostate. Because I would think such things. I simply can't forget the people who were impacted by the wrong information taught by this organization in the past. And well, it's troubling to me. Because they know people tend to forget things. The guys in charge know this about us and human nature. And I almost feel like they're counting on it. From the Watchtower of 1969, January 1st, pages 5 through 10, the series of articles you must not forget, we are told this from the faithful and discreet slave, quote, "Of course, there is a second meaning to the word forget, namely, to omit or disregard unintentionally, to neglect, to fail to take, bring, speak of, or notice. This kind of forgetting we find happening at home every day. The wife may ask her husband, 'When you come home from work tonight, would you please bring a loaf of bread with you?' He forgets. He does not do this intentionally because when he gets home, he either has to go to the store for it or do without bread at the evening meal. Little things in life like this we forget to do sometimes, but we can correct them and do. End quote. It seems like they know that people tend to forget, and it almost seems like they count on it. And at the risk of going off the rails, the concept of passing time plays a significant role in what we humans hold into our memories. Do you think the 9 guys in upstate New York may know that as well? Do you think they might just count on that? If not, where are all the old publications? I could give other examples. So many questions. I've long struggled with the easy dismissal of teaching lies that has damaged millions of people. I've dug in deep to understand why Jehovah's Witnesses do it, why humans do it by extension, and how it can all be used against us. Even good, kind, compassionate people allow themselves to forget how others, just like them, just like us, in the past were impacted by treacherous men seeking control of their lives. And here's where I've landed as of July 2024. The recent changes have had me thinking about all of this almost in overdrive, especially how a baptized Jehovah's Witness today is so easily dismissing all of this incredible absurdity of the past few months. I present to you something fascinating that has helped me somewhat understand why this might be possible with each of us as people. And it lands on a theory called motivated forgetting. From the book On the Genealogy of Morals by Friedrich Nietzsche in 1894, might I add, just 15 years after Charles Taze Russell started writing The Watchtower, we have this, quote, "The idea of motivated forgetting began with the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche in 1894. Nietzsche and Sigmund Freud had similar views on the idea of repression of memories as a form of self-preservation. Nietzsche wrote that man must forget in order to move forward. He stated that this process is active in that we forget specific events as a defense mechanism." End quote. The theory of motivated forgetting goes something like this. I'm putting this in layman's terms in case you're not following. It suggests that people forget things because they either do not want to remember them or for another particular reason. Painful and disturbing memories are most unconscious and very difficult to retrieve, but still remain in storage. And so if you're following along, we like to forget things because it makes us feel better and it helps us move forward. You can see this in much more serious terms with people who've been harmed in the past, with repression. When I would look around a Kingdom Hall or even now online at the world of Jehovah's Witnesses, watching them post online about the changes to shunning, marking, and more, and never give one thought to the people who had their lives destroyed by this in the past, I can only conclude that they're practicing motivated forgetting. Surely an organization of people in the millions whose sole purpose in life is to save the lives of innocent people would just ignore or forget how the organization's erroneous teachings have harmed people just like the rest of us, except it was in the past. It's unnerving to watch people you care about mindlessly get excited about 9 strangers in New York who just told them it's okay to grow hair on certain parts of their bodies. But it's heinous to watch those same people mindlessly accept that they're now changing doctrines that have led to people's deaths in the past, whether at their own hand or with persecution or in many other ways. Disfellowshipping and shunning, as an example, is one of those doctrines. Jehovah's Witnesses are motivated by this organization and the guys at the top to forget. They're even told to forget. They have the publications and tools and windows into the past removed so they can't look at them. You can see painful examples of motivated forgetting in the precious people, including children, that have been victims of assault inside their kingdom halls. Repressed memories can return with a vengeance as their brain fights to keep painful experiences buried in the past. And this, by extension, includes how we forget about how people were impacted in the past. But this theory of motivated forgetting can be seen everywhere in the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses. It literally permeates everything. It's evident in the mundane. For example, how long before Jehovah's Witnesses believed the beard ban of the past was never true at all? It was just an apostate lie. I'm telling you, it's coming. How many people in your congregation are talking about the removal of a governing body member named Tony Morris? Not many, you say? Have they forgotten? How long before no one remembers that we used to have a book study in people's homes and were taught that the book study was imperative because meeting in small groups was going to be very, very important to our survival through the Great Tribulation? Anyone remember? Book study's gone. How many remember the Watchtower and Awake subscription forms? And your Watchtower and Awakes arriving in little brown wrappers, couldn't wait to open it. How many remember that we used to ask for money at the door? Who remembers live costume dramas or live orchestras at the district convention in huge football stadiums? Who remembers today? No one. Those of us old enough to remember that experienced it, sure. But is this still a common talk, a common conversation among Jehovah's Witnesses? Soon no one will remember when the generation that lived it passes away, and it's sooner than you think. Much of this push for motivated forgetting can be seen in the phrase, quote, wait on Jehovah. It's their answer to everything. It's a kind way of telling us all to shut up, forget about it, and move on. The motivation to forget and adjust is openly taught by the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. From the Watchtower of 2003, March 15th, pages 20 through 25, the early Christians in the Mosaic Laws, the article, we're told this, quote, after considering these events of long ago, perhaps you are wondering, if I had lived at that time, how would I have responded as God's will was progressively revealed? Would I have rigidly held to traditional views? Or would I have been patient until the proper understanding became clear? And when it did, would I have wholeheartedly supported it? Of course, we cannot be sure how we would have reacted if we had lived back then, but we can ask ourselves, how do I respond to clarifications in Bible understanding when they are presented today? When scriptural direction is provided, do I try to apply it, observing not only the letter of the law, but the spirit of it? End quote. Don't look back there. Forget about that. What about right now? The Watchtower of August 15th, 1966, page 504 tells us, quote, A.H. McMillan offered this retrospective view. Quote, I have seen many severe trials come upon the organization and testing of the faith to those in it. With the help of God's Spirit, it survived and continued to flourish. I have seen the wisdom of patiently waiting on Jehovah to clear up our understanding of scriptural things instead of getting upset over a new thought. No matter what adjustments we would have to make from time to time in our views, that would not change the gracious provision of the ransom and God's promise of eternal life. So there was no need for us to let our faith be weakened by unfulfilled expectations or changes in view. End quote. Don't let what happened before to those innocent people bother you. Look at what's happening right now. The message is so clear. From the Watchtower of 2014, May 15th, are you moving ahead with Jehovah's organization? Paragraph 15 says this, quote, if we are to have Jehovah's favor and blessing as individuals, we must support his organization and accept adjustments in our understanding of the scriptures. End quote. The message is clear. Things are going to change. We're going to make adjustments. Don't look too far back there. We're still here, and God is still true, and eternal life is still true, and the ransom is still true. All those details, those niggly details, don't worry about that. But I'm here to ask this. Did you notice in just those 2 or 3 references from their literature what is never addressed by the Holy Spirit appointed shepherds in New York? Did you notice what was missing? Here it is. What about the precious people who were impacted by your mistakes in understanding? What about them? But motivated forgetting becomes far too real on much more serious matters inside Jehovah's organization. For anyone listening, the proof that they leverage this theory of motivated forgetting that psychology has presented to us, that they leverage this to maintain control, can be seen right now on Jesus' website. Please feel free to open your browser, go to the website, and in the Holy Spirit search bar, put in the following 2 words: beliefs clarified. You will get a page, and there you will find a long, long list of doctrinal changes and their own commentary that spans from 1870 to 2024. Nothing says we represent the creator of all things like having to adjust everything you've ever taught from day one. But here it is. But I'm here to tell you, even as you look at that page, and I hope that people are understanding my point here, something is missing. And I'm here to tell you, as you look at that page, what's missing is the most important thing. And it's this. Where is the recognition of all this false information and the impact it had on the lives of precious souls? How do the men we are told were handpicked by Jehovah go completely mute on how these false teachings impacted the lives of precious souls at that time period, in real time, that impact the lives of our children today, our parents, our friends? Jehovah, we're told, has the hair numbered on our heads. He's known us since we were embryos. But now, without discussion, he simply doesn't care about how people were impacted by wrong information during their lifetime. He has actively forgotten these people. They just don't matter. Never mind, check out your new beard. Isn't that cool? This is what a Jehovah's Witness is subtly, you might even say not so subtly, taught and exposed to in this organization. Even more accurately, they want you to forget about questioning it. Those people that came before you and I, those precious souls that were impacted by the information given to them during their lifetime in real time, well, they just don't matter. A Jehovah's Witness today never gives a second thought to the fact that a Jehovah's Witness in the year 2094 will be motivated forgetting them. Just like they are taught motivated forgetting of the children featured on the May 22nd, 1994 Awake, who gave up their lives for a doctrine taught nowhere in the Bible. Or the people who sacrificed their entire lives to this organization, believing they would be in paradise before the 20th century ended. We're in the 21st. But I'm here to tell you, none of that matters to a Jehovah's Witness today. They don't think about it. They've been motivated to forget. And they were people just like you and me. Take one look at what the governing body has put in place, an aggressive weekly schedule that conditions millions to practice motivated forgetting. You see, cults are very good at making you forget what happened before you, the past. And Jehovah's Witnesses are no different. One example of this can be seen in one simple teaching. It's just off the top of my head. Up to roughly the year 2000, Jehovah's Witnesses would not and could not accept any form of human blood, even if it meant their life. Accepting blood could even get you disfellowshipped. But in the year roughly around 2000, if memory serves, Jehovah's Witnesses were told that they were now allowed to accept components of donated blood once the blood had been broken down into blood fractions. You could accept fractions. You know, you could accept ham. You could eat mayonnaise. You could eat lettuce. You could eat a tomato. But what you couldn't have was a ham sandwich. Make sense? The Watchtower of 2000, June 15th, 1931, page 31, says this, quote, "Beyond that, when it comes to fractions of any of the primary components, each Christian, after careful and prayerful meditation, must conscientiously decide for himself." End quote. You thought the beards were big. The governing body suddenly and without explanation told Jehovah's Witnesses in 2000 that they could take, the stuff that made up blood, just not blood. Makes perfect sense, right? And let me tell you something, Jehovah's Witnesses were ecstatic. They were celebrating this latest round of new light back then. I know because I was there. I actually gave the service meeting part, and it was me that was part of the other elders distributing the no blood cards. I handled that Q&A insert in the Kingdom Ministry. Remember that one? It was always 2 pages, lots of questions. And make no mistake, this new light saved more than one life. Allowing a witness to suddenly, even without explanation, take fractions actually saved lives. Everyone went home that night, and every night since, feeling a lot safer because we could now take a blood component. People dug in and educated themselves on what made up blood. But I'm here to tell you, and again, I recognize I'm an oddball, I drove home sick to my stomach. I called a meeting to the then presiding overseer on our body of elders, who was also one of my best friends, who also served on the hospital liaison committee. I called him. We met in person. I've always known that the blood doctrine isn't in the Bible. It ain't there. But that night I was sick, and I was sick for many nights after. I'm sick about it now. I asked him when we met privately, how could this be? And I'll never forget what he told me. He had spoken to someone back in Brooklyn because he too was struggling with it, who said to him, "We want to get out of this blood business." That they don't know enough about blood to make these kind of decisions for people. I couldn't and I can't forget the look on his face as he told me this. And when he told me this, there was this stifling pause that hung in the air. And to that comment, I said, what about all the people, the children that have died because they couldn't take a blood fraction, but they can now? I'll just never forget his face. He too looked pained and he had no answer for me. He had no answer. And the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses wants you to forget. And the worst part of this one example, there are so many, everyone outside of their family, and sometimes even people that were in the family of someone lost to this, have dismissed all of it. Someone who could have taken a blood fraction but died because it wasn't announced from the stage yet, they too dismiss all of it. How do we forget precious lives? People like you and me damaged or lost by this cult. I can't shake it. Never have been able to. I've never been able to shake it even when I realize that this organization is anything but the truth, and I know what it is. The governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses has overseen the perfect marriage, especially for older Jehovah's Witnesses, those of us that were around in the 60s, 70s, 80s. They've married motivated forgetting to sunk cost fallacy. And boom, the result is you get a zombie baby. A zombie. A Jehovah's Witness who lives their life in ambivalence, complacency, excuses, laziness, and most especially forgetting precious souls just like them. And all of it falls under that umbrella of motivated forgetting. It's just my opinion. People just forget and move on. The kid who could have lived with a blood fraction just months before it was announced died, but now it's okay? You might be wondering how any of us or anyone can be guilty of this. And in honesty, all of us are guilty of this guy included. Even if it's for stretches of time, but certainly in our time as Jehovah's Witnesses, we would dig our heels in and defend this organization, not looking to the past or remembering the people behind us. People that had sacrificed everything, obeying these guys. And let me tell you, the governing body knows that this is true. They even admit it. From the Watchtower of 1976, December 15th, page 739, What Did the Wise Man Mean is the article. They say this, quote, "There is no remembrance of people of former times, nor will there be of those who will come to be later. There will prove to be no remembrance even of them among those who will come to be still later on." Quoting Ecclesiastes 1, 8 through 11. The paragraph continues, quote, "Then, when they died, they were forgotten by later generations. Even persons who made a notable name for themselves faded from the memory of the living and were eclipsed by those alive who enjoy prominence." End quote. Yeah, it's human nature. And wow, is it alive and well in Jehovah's Witnesses. With each change, no one thinks about, well, what about the people that didn't hear this? If or when you take the time to visit their website and search for that section I mentioned earlier, Beliefs Clarified, do me a favor, or maybe it's even doing yourself a favor. Scroll down the page slowly. Go slow. Look at all of those dates and all of those changed teachings that Jehovah and his son sat back and listened to being taught to those precious souls of that time period incorrectly, erroneously. They weren't even true. But more importantly, Jehovah and Jesus, they allowed countless millions to base their life or death decisions on those very teachings you're looking at on that page. And as they admit on that page, those teachings were all wrong. They adjusted them. The page is called Beliefs Clarified. Just because you and I didn't happen to be a Jehovah's Witness in 1925 and millions then living would never die, and we believed it, does it make it any more horrific that people just like you and I that were there in 1925 did believe it and are now forgotten by this organization in favor of today's crop of Jehovah's Witnesses and controlling them? Will you be just like them when the organization is discussing the past in, I don't know, 2095? If you're a witness, will you be in that bucket of forgotten people? A forgotten soul who blindly obeyed and, well, oopsie, we were wrong all along. New light incoming. Don't look back there at those folks. In my opinion, this is a form of motivated forgetting. Nowhere is this more evident than in the preaching work. You know, the stuff that we all grew up on as Jehovah's Witnesses, knocking on doors, handing out literature, handing out these teachings, getting the message out. And in recent conventions, we've seen CGI angels are behind all of it. The angels are with us at that book cart. The angels are telling us where to go. They just kind of whisper in our ear, take our word for it. Look at the pretty movie. But the preaching work exposes motivated forgetting at its highest level. What does a Jehovah's Witness do with the preaching work? How do you come to terms with the fact that each of us was out there knocking on a stranger's door and telling them we had all the answers to life, only to learn we were wrong? That publication we were handing them was wrong. The householder could see it immediately and base their response on what we told them, all of which, again, was wrong and has since been adjusted. Forget that the whole teaching is all a fantasy, because it is. Even within the doctrinal definitions of this organization, the teachings have all changed. So what that means is that we were knocking on people's doors. We were doing informal witnessing. We were out front of a book cart today preaching the wrong light. It was wrong. And asking people to follow us to salvation because we had all the answers. With all this new light across so many of the organization's teachings, isn't the governing body responsible for going back to every single, solitary, precious soul that we preach to and updating them on the new light? Correcting the thinking of a precious potential sheep, a soul that is wandering out there in the world, misinformed due to our information? How do Jehovah's Witnesses ignore this? Pull their book cart and stand in front of it in a park today? How about the householder or neighbor you were preaching to about the 20th century not ending before Armageddon was here, that thought, you know, after listening to you, you were clearly nuts and kicked you off their doorstep? Do Jehovah's Witnesses hold a responsibility to return to that person, apologize, and update them on, you know, overlapping generations? Good luck. That person back then in the 20th century that you were telling would never see the 21st, they never became a Jehovah's Witness because what you taught them was wrong. How is a Jehovah's Witness, or how did any of us, all of us guilty of it, sleep at night, knowing that these people are doomed to die? How does the governing body roll out a convention without a campaign that's going back to every single person ever exposed to Jehovah's Witnesses that got old light and updating them? Otherwise, they're going to die. They do it by means of motivated forgetting. Forget about it. We bear no responsibility for what we told them. We've got new light. How can the governing body and this organization claim to have the truth when what they have taught just 30 years ago, just 10 years ago, is now obsolete. It's old info. And when Tony Morris, the demoted king, got up there on video and said those that didn't go out in field service regularly had blood on their hands. Remember that video? My question then, what do Tony and the current guys have on their hands? Can you imagine teaching something that wasn't true and not correcting it? Welcome to Jehovah's Witnesses, because that's what you're doing every single day. You've simply been motivated to forget that you taught something that wasn't true. People listened to it, heard it, looked at it, and went, this is bonkers. I'm not doing this. And you don't go back and correct them. You're right, it was bonkers. Jehovah's just going to kill him anyway? Motivated forgetting. Just forget about it. Look at the latest book we have. Look at our fancy videos. A psychology study from 2013 titled Motivated to Forget: The Effects of In-Group Wrongdoing on Memory and Collective Guilt by Katie Rotella, a fifth-year student in the social psychology doctoral program at Northwestern University, and Jennifer Reichson, a teaching professor of psychology at Northwestern University. This study helped me understand why I had struggled with how easily former misled Jehovah's Witnesses could be so easily dismissed and forgotten. Their research uncovered the following, quote, 2 studies demonstrated that one response to learning about one's in-group as a perpetrator of intergroup aggression, or I'm inserting here, end quote, wrong teachings, anything else that just isn't true, back to the quote. I'm going to reread it. Quote, 2 studies demonstrated that one response to learning about one's in-group as a perpetrator of intergroup aggression is simply to forget the threatening events. Much like the findings of other research on motivated forgetting, the memory lapses presently demonstrated may not be indicative of actual problems in encoding or retrieval, but simply unwillingness to repeat information that challenges the in-group's moral character, end quote. I don't think it's hard to see that the leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses wants to bury the organization's history into a lockbox in our minds. By looking at it, by remembering it, by asking about those precious people who some of are gone, some of them, so awful to even think about. By doing that, that means we're going to have to look at ourselves and question this organization's moral character. They want us to forget. Even more accurate is that the vast majority of Jehovah's Witnesses won't even think about this or take the time to look at it. They won't even research their own literature. Come on. Why? Because if they look at their own literature, if they look into the history, and they start to put faces and lives and human beings to it, it's most certainly going to challenge the group's moral character. They've harmed people, folks. And there's also the ongoing reminders that if you do try to commit this to memory, if you do try to look at those precious souls and wonder how they were impacted, and you look at the old literature and you look at our history, you will then be labeled an apostate yourself. You too will be removed from this organization, and you too will be forgotten. The research paper continues by the 2 doctors, the student and doctor, quote, the present work demonstrates the power of threatening individuals' collective moral identity on memory for the moral failings and relevant intergroup relations. Specifically, confronting members of perpetrator groups with evidence of their group's culpability can cause backlash in the form of the motivated forgetting of the violent acts, and for high identifiers, reduce collective guilt, end quote. It's human nature. I've said this before, and we all do it. It's much easier to look the other way, to forget. Because once a Jehovah's Witness looks at this organization critically and considers the precious people impacted by it, they are forced to make a decision that will very likely completely change their life. And quite frankly, folks, most won't do it. They're motivated to forget how all of this organization's mistakes, changes, lies, flip-flopping doctrines, and crimes have impacted very real people like you and me, those that came before us. It's just so much easier to pretend that those people never existed, or to never validate that they were learning these things in real time, and it ruined their lives. The governing body counts on Jehovah's Witnesses forgetting. They encourage forgetting. You can forget the teachings and mistakes of this organization if you want to, but people, how can you forget the other people, just like you and me, that it's impacted? How can we do that? All of this under the claim by the governing body that they care about each person on this planet. They care about us as individuals. I want to take you to their recent brochure, Return to Jehovah. It begins with a letter from the governing body. You can find it online, where they tell us the following. This is a letter from the governing body. Quote, never forgets his worshipers who he reaches out to them, often doing so through their fellow believers. The letter continues, quote, please know that it is in a similar spirit that we have prepared this brochure. First, we listened, carefully considering the circumstances and expressions of a number who drifted away. Then we turned to the scriptures, prayerfully examining accounts of how Jehovah helped his servants in the past when they faced similar circumstances. Finally, we combine those scriptural accounts with modern-day experiences to produce this brochure. We warmly invite you to examine this material. Please be assured of our sincere love for you." End quote. Really? I'm not going to go into the people who've never got a shepherding call, who have drifted away, fading. I think we know what reality is. But this brochure continues on page 13 with the following comment. Quote, "Please know that Jehovah wants you to return to him. How can you be sure? Consider. With much prayer, this brochure was carefully prepared. It was brought to your attention, perhaps by a Christian elder or another fellow believer. Then you were moved to read it and respond to its message. All of this is proof that Jehovah has not forgotten you. On the contrary, he is gently drawing you back to him." End quote. First, in real world terms, has this happened to you? If you're someone who's drifted away, if you're someone who's gotten weak, you're someone who stopped attending meetings or stopped going out in service, has this happened to you? Elders and fellow believers beating down your door to save you? I can tell you quite personally, and it's got its own dynamic, let's be honest. I threatened people. I've never heard from anyone in that organization in 15 years. 15 years. It's a fairly well-known elder. That's uncomfortable to say, but I was involved at district circuit level, watched our study conductor, book study, endless responsibilities and quote-unquote privileges. I haven't heard from anybody in 15 years. How about you? Are the angels on a coffee break? Maybe they're on a coffee break. Are the elders in my area on a coffee break? I don't know. Let's just get that part out of the way. First, it just isn't true. Thanks for making it sound fluffy and warm and fuzzy, but it's not. But second, and here's the point I want to drive home. Why did Jesus wait this long to prayerfully create this brochure? Why? Can someone explain it? Because again, what about all the precious souls and people prior to the printing of this brochure who left this organization or died believing old light? What about them? It's clear to me that they don't matter. And we aren't supposed to think about them or how this organization impacted their lives during their time period and the decisions in a negative and devastating way that impacted them. You might be wondering, come on, all right, this has definitely been a rant. He was right. But Stacy, what do you want him to do? Come on, what is a Jehovah's Witness supposed to do about all the people that were harmed or died in the name of this religion in the past? Or what can be done to give back the lost time and the lost potential in people's lives, even now? Really, what can we do? Seriously, man, what do you want the governing body and Jehovah's Witnesses to do about all those people impacted in the past and even today? Well, they could start by apologizing. The Watchtower of 1993, November 15th, Why Admit a Mistake, page 30, says this, quote, "An elder may be reluctant to admit a mistake because he fears that this will undermine his authority in the congregation. However, trying to justify, ignore, or minimize a mistake is much more likely to cause others to lose confidence in his oversight. A mature brother who humbly apologizes, perhaps for some thoughtless remark, earns the respect of others," end quote. And I'm here to say that that reference apparently does not apply to the governing body. And they continue to promote motivated forgetting regarding the many erroneous things they have taught millions of people. Governing body member and future king Gage Flegel told us they don't have to apologize and that they're not even embarrassed. And the common Jehovah's Witness looks to them and follows their example. And let's be blunt. The lies the leadership of this organization required millions of their followers to obey is beyond the power of an apology. It ain't going to work anyway. They've gotten people killed. Is an apology even enough? But isn't it something that they won't even say they're sorry? Let it sit with you for a minute. They're not sorry. They're not even embarrassed for all of this. All those lives, those faces, those dreams, all the potential lost. I must say at the end of this rant, I'm left with many unresolved questions in my mind on this subject as I continue to explore it and try to make sense of it. But transparently, it was the active forgetting of how innocent people were impacted throughout the history of this organization and how no one wanted to talk about it or them that was very instrumental in me waking up. I want to encourage everyone to think about this as we go about our daily lives. Maybe we have a family, a mate, a home, a retirement plan. Maybe we have those things. Maybe we have our health. Maybe we're going to the Kingdom Hall tonight. But many people just like us no longer have any of those things because of Jehovah's Witnesses. If you're a Jehovah's Witness listening, I'm asking this. Please give it consideration. If Jehovah's Witnesses are not being taught motivated forgetting by the governing body, then answer me this. I'd like you to name 10 Jehovah's Witnesses that attended the 1935 convention in Washington, D.C., where we learned that Jesus always intended to make a paradise earth and that they would never taste death. Can you give me 10 names? Can you give me one name? They've all been forgotten. And just for the record, I can't either. But before you dismiss that question as absurd, answer me this. Can you tell me the name of just one member of the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses? Your answer says it all. I want to thank you for joining me this week. Wherever you may be well.